Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all somewhere safe, warm, and cozy tonight. I'm here filming at the Grandview Cemetery. It's about 4 o'clock in the morning. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who's resting here for allowing me to use this space. If I'm bothering anyone or if I'm not wanted here, please just let me know politely and I'll clear out and film somewhere else. So I work in an industry where I'm often outdoors. I work on construction crews that build hiking trails. So often for this type of work, you're living and working in very remote environments. And in this line of work, sometimes weird things happen, and sometimes you hear stories of other people to whom weird things have happened. I had a crew leader on one of my very first crews who said he would do what he called calling Sasquatch. He claimed that you could attract Sasquatch by hitting a tree with the wooden handle of an axe, and then it would make this loud banging sound that traveled a long way. And if Sasquatches heard, they would make a reciprocal sound at their end, and you could hear them. So he hit the tree with the handle of this axe, and a minute later, we did in fact hear a similar banging coming from a distant place in the woods. Later, we found out that he had some friends at the next campsite over who he'd coordinated with beforehand to set that up. So no Sasquatch. But I think that illustrates one of the points I meant to make, which is that some of the stories I'm going to tell tonight are things that I believe may have actually happened. Other ones I think are just, made up, told for the sake of a good story. But I think those are as good too in their own way. There's an old saying, "Si non è vero, è ben trovato," which is Italian for if it's not true, it's well imagined. And I think you should hear these stories with that in mind. Now, I'm going to tell them sort of in order. It appears to be starting to rain, so we might have to clear out in a minute. I'm going to tell these stories in order from the ones I find most plausible to the ones I find least plausible. The first one I'm going to tell, I almost hesitate to tell because it's not like, unlike the other ones I'm going to tell, it's not like, ooh, a fun, spooky ghost story. It's something that I believe actually happened. It's kind of unnerving. I have a friend who went backpacking in Colorado. I think it was the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, possibly the Lizard Mountains, somewhere down there. She was fond of photography. She is fond of photography, and she took an old-fashioned camera with her, the kind where you have to manually develop the photos. You can't see them until the film's been developed. And one night she woke up in the middle of the night thinking she might have heard a noise near her tent. She looked around. There was nothing. She went back to bed. When she came home from the trip, she developed all her pictures, and in addition to all the pictures that she'd taken, there was one of her in her tent, asleep. So I think a lot of the time when we tell stories about, Sasquatch or werewolves or vampires or whatever, it's sort of a way of dealing with our fears in a way that keeps them at arm's length. Like that last story I told, that was probably about a real person, a somewhat disturbed person who would do something like that. Sneak into a woman's tent and take a picture of her. But we don't like hearing about those sort of things directly. Those things are scary in a way that's not fun. So we come up with stories so we can deal with them at more of a remove. Now, there's danger in the woods. I don't want to diminish anyone's enjoyment of it. I hope that by telling these stories I'm not scaring anyone out of going to the wilderness. But, Jesus. It's not actually raining, it's just when the wind blows. These branches are wet, and when the wind blows, it rains a little bit. Here, just water falls from the branches. So, I had another friend who told me about a time she was on a day hike with a friend of hers, and she asked him to stop for a minute so she could walk off into the woods and go use the bathroom, and she did that. But as she was walking back to the trail, she forgot where she was. Not just that she got lost, but the way she described it, she forgot everything about herself. She forgot what she was doing that day, who she was with, her name. It was like just this total amnesia, is the way she described it to me later. But oddly, she wasn't that scared. She wasn't that worried. She just sort of had this little voice in the back of her head saying, "You'll be all right. Don't worry about it. Just get something to eat. That's the main thing. You don't have to worry about being found right now. Just stay where you are and find something to eat." So she walked for a little ways in the woods. She found some berries. She ate them. She kept walking. And that voice in the back of her head, "Don't worry. You're all right. Don't worry. Just find something to eat. You need to have plenty to eat." She walked a ways further. She comes across a squirrel, a dead squirrel. She doesn't have any food in her pack, but she's got some other things. It was just a day hike, so she didn't bring food, just a couple emergency essentials, a flashlight, a pocket knife. Remember, get something to eat. She takes out her pocket knife, skins the squirrel, eats it raw. She emphasized that this didn't seem strange to her at the time. She wasn't thinking at all about, why can't I remember what I'm doing here? Why can't I find the trail? What should I be doing? She didn't feel worried. She was just content to sort of wander around. A while later, she stumbled back onto the trail. She saw her friend, the guy she'd been hiking with that day. She saw him from behind. He was walking away from her, but she didn't recognize him. And as soon as she saw him, that voice in the back of her head just said, "Careful." She hid behind a tree. The guy must have heard something because he turned around. And the voice in the back of her head said, "Remember, find something to eat. You've got to get something to eat." And she really emphasized over and over again as she told this story that she wasn't thinking about what she was doing as she was doing it. She wasn't planning to do anything. She was just sort of, it's like when there's a loose thread in your shirt and you sort of pull on it absent-mindedly without noticing it's there, and before you notice it, half your sleeve is gone. She just sort of, without thinking about it at all, reached in her pack, took out her pocket knife, started walking behind her friend, getting closer to him. And the voice in the back of her head is going, "Eat, eat." She gets closer to him. The voice is getting louder. "Eat, eat, eat." And at just that moment, he turns around and says, "Whoa, what are you doing?" And he said her name, and hearing her name must have snapped her out of it. She looks down at the knife. She just says, "I'm not sure." And then she remembered, hearing her name must have done it. She remembered who she was, what she'd been doing. Her friend said he'd actually been looking for her for hours, like she'd been gone most of the day. It had only seemed like a few minutes to her. So after that, they hiked out really quickly. He made her go in front because he was, she'd come up on him with a knife. Of course, he was a little suspicious of her after that. they went to the hospital. When she described what had happened to the doctors, they thought maybe it was either an epileptic seizure or a stroke, like an ischemic stroke. They put her through the MRI machine, and they couldn't find any signs of either of those. She had no lasting symptoms. And nothing like that ever happened to her again. But that's sort of a funny postscript to this story. From then on, she did insist that whenever she went away from camp to go to the bathroom in the woods, someone would come with her, just so she didn't have another of those trance states or whatever they were hit her, which must have been awkward for the other person, but, understandable. Now, the last story I wanted to tell tonight is one that I don't believe at all. It was told to me by a friend of mine back in high school, back in my school year, a program I did in high school that essentially did the same thing, repairing hiking trails. I'm going to tell it exactly the way he told it to me, so I'm going to tell it in the first person, like it happened to me. So, one evening after school, a friend of mine came over to my place. He would come over to my place fairly often to hang out, talk, play games, whatever. This evening, though, he had this photograph with him. This old-fashioned, Polaroid photograph. He says, "Oh, I found this picture just sort of lying on the sidewalk on my way here." He shows it to me. I'm gonna. I want to make sure you can see this right because it's important. It's this young woman. She's smiling at the camera and doing this. You can't see it, but it's the. This story isn't gonna work well in these lighting conditions. I think I'm gonna finish filming somewhere else.